Hello, welcome back. Notcast 254. It's a Sunday night. It's the 3rd of December 2022. I should be in Glasgow right now watching The Cure playing. Oh, what's about 20 past 8? Probably playing Pictures of You around about now at the Hydro. But the best laid plans of mice and men went a little bit awry. I ran out of time and opportunity, and so I'm not seeing The Cure tonight. Instead, I am seeing them in Birmingham and Cardiff and London. So if you are going to any of those and you see me, I don't bite. I'm lovely, really. Say hello. Or don't if you don't want to. If you think, oh, there's that jerk off YouTube and I don't want to talk to him, don't talk to me. That's okay too. I don't mind. Today, I am going to be talking about Nine Inch Nails' fourth, I can't believe it's four already, fourth studio album, released in 2005. And that album is called With Teeth. A whole bunch of CDs, CD singles, DVDs, Blu-rays, DVD singles. What a terrible format that is. And of course, your good old-fashioned vinyl. This period is one of those ones where I'm going to give you a bit of my personal history as well, around what was happening in my life at around about that time, as well as talking about the band, primarily because I think this is the first period of being a fan of Nine Inch Nails where I thought, the direction the band have gone in and the direction I've gone in are two quite different places indeed. And it happens. If you're an artist in a band, you can't expect to be the soundtrack to your fans' lives forever, permanently and in perpetuity. Sometimes they go off in different directions, and obviously sometimes bands' fan bases shrink or expand as time goes on. Sometimes they shrink and they never come back. Sometimes they shrink and then they come back. And like for example, Cure fans, some of them at the moment, especially after seeing them at Glastonbury on the television, were going, "Oh, the Cure, fantastic. Where have they been?" And I'm like, they've been right under your fucking nose, mate. You're the one that's not been paying attention. Now, that sounds a little bitchy, but hey, I am what I am, as Popeye said. And I never gave up being a fan of a band, even Nine Inch Nails, when they went in a slightly different direction to where I was still buying the records, I was still seeing them live. Maybe it wasn't touching me quite the way that things like Pretty Hate Machine and Broken and the Downward Spiral and the Fragile had, but it was still recognisably, the band that I loved, just a little bit different. And so 2005 saw on 3rd of May 2005 the release of the fourth studio album by the Nine Inch Nails, With the Teeth. That's not a Marquis Smith thing, that's actually how the vocal is for the title track of the album, With Teeth. And the crazy thing is that coming up in the next 3.5 years for Nine Inch Nails, we had 4 studio records, one of which was a double, compared to the previous 16 years, which had seen 4 studio records. So up to this point, we'd seen, obviously, Pretty Hate Machine, Broken, which was an EP, Downward Spiral, Fragile, and finally in 2005, With Teeth. So, and then in 2005 to 2008, you had With Teeth, Year Zero, Ghosts, and The Slip. So the band became fiercely prolific at the point at which they started to peel away from me, which was a strange experience, actually, to be a fan. To go all those years that I'd played songs like, or albums like The Fragile to death, trying to get to understand those records and to get under the skin of those records, and then all of a sudden they were coming out so fast I couldn't necessarily keep track of them. I felt like I'd barely got to grips with Teeth by the end of the With Teeth period in early 2007. And then all of a sudden there was a new studio record called Year Zero, which was just about to come out. That's the next episode. But there we are. So let me kind of talk through where I was at the time. So when With Teeth came out, I was in my early 30s. I had just started a couple of years previously on an important relationship, which was to last for many years to come. I was just about to become a parent. I'd had something which you could, if you squinted at it from a distance, you could call a career. I had aspirations to get a mortgage and finally, belatedly, to grow up although don't grow up, it's a trap. And where my life was somewhere very different from where I think this album is. So With Teeth, it sounded to me like the whole of the album, both musically and lyrically, Trent was grasping or battling with the very nature of identity itself. So for me, the title, With Teeth, really important title. Because what it means is it's kind of like when you think about something's got consequences, it has teeth, and you feel those teeth and you feel the sharpness of those teeth. And talking about something that's got teeth into it, you go, right, so that's the consequences of the decision that you've made. And when you get to the age of when you're about 33, 34, those type of things, you can't just kind of like, ascribe stupid behaviours to being a little bit young and a little bit stupid. You're nearly halfway through, mate. You're at the point where you can't really go, youthful hijinks, that's why I drank too much or drug too much or, sex too much or whatever it was. You kind of go, look, you're time to get a better relationship with yourself. You've spent probably from the age of 18 onwards, at least a decade and a bit, trying to understand about how consequences work, around how relationships work, about what you should and shouldn't be doing, how you should and shouldn't be behaving. And then you've got the kind of like the idea is eventually, every night comes to an end. There is a dawn, there is a reckoning. And With Teeth, to me, as an album, feels like it's approaching and talking about the consequences of actions and life and behaviours. And if you're a little bit daft, obviously, you did the fucking about. Here's the finding out part of it. So With Teeth is firstly, I think, Trent's first post-sobriety record. But it's also the record that really starts to address, I think, the consequences of behaviours. So where you have The Fragile, for example, and huge chunks of The Fragile are around rebuilding your identity and your, who am I, what am I going to be, what kind of relationships am I going to have. With Teeth is very much about the relationship that one person has with themselves. It's like going, right, so I now need to reset who I am and what I am and how I behave and what I feel and what I do and how I do it and everything that goes with that. And it's a kind of like a phrase which may have come out from the process of recovery from addiction, which is when you reconcile yourself to both the powers that are more important and powerful than yourself, but also the consequences of your actions and the legacy of that. There are the teeth which are biting you around the things that you've done in the past. It's as an album, it's very minimal. I mean, especially compared to something like The Fragile, which was, depending upon the configuration, 2.5 hours, 30 songs, 3 sides of vinyl, or 4, depending on which version you got. If you got the Deviations version, it's a quadruple LP, 2 CDs. It's a weighty, enormous beast. With Teeth is very minimal by comparison. Originally, it was going to be called Bleed Through. And the idea behind that was the concept of loss and disassociation, the concept of trying to start a new page and start again, but then to find that what you used to be has bled through into who you are now. There are no clean slates, there are no fresh starts. You can't go back and change the past, you can only change the future. And there was a part of Bleed Through, I think, also took its title from the idea around being alternate layers of reality, is that, you might think one thing about your reality and somebody else might think another thing about your reality. And it's around the layers of that permeating each other, which after about 4 or 5 songs, Trent removed that concept. He said as the songs were written, those songs no longer applied to the concept. It was how almost all of the material from With Teeth was written in a short concentrated burst from the start of 2004 to early 2005. And some of the songs which were written for the Bleed Through concept, I think, were picked up and revitalised and reapproached for the Year Zero album in 2007. What you will see throughout the whole of this period is that some of the concepts around Bleed Through still exist in the artwork. So as you can see here, there's the Nin logo, but that's been distorted. You can also see when you look at the logos for Hamlet Thieves, the idea of a distorted waveform there. That's a bootleg, don't have a look at that. There's the CD and the DVD versions of the album. The only single which has the the idea of the face that comes through it, and then every day is exactly the same there, with the theory of dawn and rebirth and rebuilding yourself. All of those artworks are built upon I think a concept that was put together by a chap called Rob Sheridan, who, if you don't follow him on Twitter and Instagram, is well worth a follow. He talked about his idea of glitch art, and by glitch art what he meant was that, for example, he would print out the artwork and then he'd scan it, but he'd put it through the scanner, and as the paper came through the scanner he'd pull it, or he'd distort it, or he'd bend it in certain directions. And so what you get is a completely random kind of approach to what was happening here, that came down purely to completely random chance. Or, for example, some of the art that he did for some of the other stuff is that he would go into the code of the JPEG, and he would go or whatever the raw format file was, and he would muck about with that and change the DNA of the code that built up the image to create something new and different. It was inspired by science and data. It was inspired by the idea of corruption and errors to make something. How far can you distort something? How far can you bend something whilst it's still recognizable? And also, I think some of the ideas that came from the Unknown Pleasures LP, you kind of can see it there, is that you've got the idea of a concept of a set of straight lines, but then those straight lines are bent and broken by circumstances and things that we as people barely comprehend. And the idea being, especially around the glitch nature of the artwork, is actually, if you think about the Nine Inch Nails logo that you've got on there, you can scout and go, oh right, so Teeth have actually kind of like latched onto and torn away part of the image. And you can also see that in the back there of the LP cover. I think it's an album that With Teeth has aged incredibly well. Actually, it's aged far better than it did when it came out. When it came out, it hit me in a place which I wasn't necessarily at. So I was starting to get my shit together by that point in my life. I'd moved down to London. I'd had 2 pretty good relationships, one of which I was in, and I resolved probably about a year and a bit before to change some of my behaviours, because I was pulling out slightly beyond where I probably should have done. The bit where you're right, so you've drunk too much and you've done too much other stuff, and you're 30, 31, and you kind of go, yeah, you don't want to be the oldest swinger in town, do you? You don't want to be the oldest guy at the party. I then started to realise I need to get it together. But having the ability to do something is not the same as should I do something. Having the ability to overdo certain things. I was very good at overdoing certain things. I just thought, no, I've gone too far. So there was a moment when I was in Manchester, probably about a year before this LP came out, and I just had this moment where I kind of thought about the stuff that had happened over the preceding weeks, and I thought, I need to straighten up, because my life was starting to become unbalanced in those respects. So yeah, With Teeth is an album that was that was the first post addiction, the first sober Trent Reznor album, and it's got a very different mindset to the previous ones. You wouldn't necessarily know it by listening to the songs, but it's most definitely there in the discipline and the focus, even right down to the songwriting. Is that there are, I think, 13 songs on the CD, 14 on the vinyl and European issues. There's an extra track called Home, which is on the album as well, which doesn't quite fit onto the track listing, depending upon who you talk to, and it's quite a focused, taut LP. So let's go. Sorry, I've been talking a lot around it. Let's go for the first single. The first single is an undisputed, inconceivable, unbelievable Nine Inch Nails classic. It is The Hand That Feeds, a song that is a regular part of their set list to this day. Here is the 9-inch vinyl single, pretty battered as you can see, but of course I was buying those records to play. I wasn't buying those records to keep at the time. It's backed with a dub mix, which is done by DFA being the label that LCD Sound System assigned to. We have on the 12-inch here some DFA remixes. So we have the DFA mix and an instrumental, and on side 2 we have a second version which runs to 14.5 minutes. So this 12 inches is pretty good. And the DFA mixes, they take the kind of approach to rhythm and thunk that you will get from LCD Sound System and Shit Robot and some of the other bands that are on that label. Hot Chip, I think. No, not Hot Chip. Holy Ghost as well are on there, and you can listen to that. You can clearly see the lineage of the bits where Nine Inch Nails ends and DFA begins. The 3 formats, if you got the 3 ones, you got the 9-inch and the CD and the DVD single, for example, was a whole £6. So the CD single, by the way, this one is backed with well, this is a DVD single, actually, one of the worst formats of all time, possibly up there with the cassette single. And it features the video, it features the album version, it features a mix called the Straight Mix, and it comes with a poster which you can fold out. It's not a very big poster, but it's a poster. But as you can see, the band's lineup has changed, and so we have Trent Reznor, Jerome Dillon on drums, I think Aaron North from the Icarus line on guitar, I think that is what's his name now, Geordie White from Marilyn Manson, and Alessandro Cortini on guitars, keyboards and all kinds of things, basically filling the place that Charlie Clouser had. And Alessandro Cortini is still a part of Nine Inch Nails' live setup to this day, or at least he was until the last time I checked. There was also the DVD single, or more correctly the CD single. This features the straight mix and the dub mix, and I'm guessing the straight mix is the remix by DFA that's also on the 12-inch there. Hand That Feeds is a classic Nine Inch Nails track. It's got all the hallmarks of what makes a great Nine Inch Nails song. It has a slow intro that suddenly explodes. It's got a propulsive rhythm that doesn't stop. It's got a lyrical compulsion. Now, as I've said before, one of the things that I love about the bands that I love is that sense that when you're listening to it, that it's a work of passion by the artist, is that the artist has been gone, I'm compelled to make this music. This music is pouring out of me like water out of a flooded gully, that I have to make this record. And when the record has that sense of compulsion, I also have that sense as a listener, is that the artist is invested in this, and I also get that feeling. And it's a really, really important thing to have. The Hand That Feeds as a track, by the way, is a very important song in the Nine Inch Nails canon for 2 reasons. The first one is it's a song that has become almost a totem to describe governmental authority and overreach, which happened post 9/11 and also happened in the Donald Trump environment and George W. Bush environment, as well as the Boris Johnson administration in the UK. So it was a reflection of abusive authority, which was overreaching its abilities. Probably inspired by 9/11 and the way that the American government decided that it was going to make an authoritarian stance out of its political opinion. I'm not trying to take a political view about that. That's just how I interpret the song. The fact that George Bush has his face on screen when the band played it live probably gave that away. And then the other part of it is it's also a song that reflects upon Trent's relationship to his former label boss of TVT, who I think there was a court case and Trent was awarded a lot of money because there'd been some misappropriation of funds, according to what I understand. I could be wrong, but that's how I interpret it. So Trent, as the artist, kind of writing a song about how the manager, who was meant to enable and encourage and support him, had bitten the hand that fed him, because obviously without Trent's skills, the manager has nothing to sell, and had somehow that relationship had soured. So yes, The Hand That Feeds, an absolute Nine Inch Nails classic. I absolutely love it. One of my favourite Nine Inch Nails songs. And then of course we've got the LP stroke CD itself with teeth. This is the UK version of the album, standard retail CD, very minimalist packaging, as you can see. So there's no booklet in there. There's just again, a glitch distorted picture of Trent. There's just a list of the songs that there are, and some very basic technical credits that are absolutely unavoidable, and the CD itself in a digipack, digipacks being one of the very worst inventions of mankind, but so be it. Now, why are digipacks one of the worst inventions? Well, because if you drop them, break them, or if the teeth come off on the CD, you can't replace them. You're stuck with it forever. You can't hot swap it out with, let's say, a jewel case. So if you've got the jewel case for New Order's Republic, for example, which is there, and you drop it and you break it and there's a crack in that, you get another jewel case. You take the inside out, slot it in, bingo, bango, bongo, job done. You crack a digipack, you're fucked. You got to buy another CD. And that's why I don't like digipacks. Also, from an OCD perspective, I want all of my CDs to be the same kind of height on the shelf, not bigger, not smaller, so that they all look uniform when they're sat there. The album also had in the US a DVD-A double-sided release. Again, very minimalist packaging here. But it did have a slightly different kind of release, in so much as one side of it was a 5.1 mix of the album alongside the video for the hand that feeds, an interactive discography, and as it says, 13 new tracks. So this one doesn't have the track Home on it. Track Home is only on the European and Japanese CD. So let's go through the LP, bearing in mind I haven't actually taken it out of its sleeve for a very long period of time. The album opens with the track All the Love in the World. And All the Love in the World, by the way, is the very first Nine Inch Nails song to have love in the title, if not actually to have love in the lyrics. It makes some reference to, there's a track called A Million, so there's a reference to being a million miles away, which is also mentioned in Hurt, and it's mentioned in the track 1 Million that's on the slip. It's also got some additional verses. So if you downloaded the booklet from nin.com/with-teeth, there were additional verses in there that weren't sung on All the Love in the World. It's the first time that Trent actually sings love on record, I think, apart from the demo of Maybe Just Once from 1989. So all the songs which Nine Inch Nails have recorded and released previously have obviously been about relationships, but none of them have actually directly mentioned love as the greatest painkiller. With Teeth is the first one where the word love gets mentioned in any of the songs, and that's pretty surprising. I wasn't expecting that, but then it goes, how come you get all the love in the world, being the opening song on the album. And it draws a parallel, as I said before. There's a line about being, a million miles away, which is like Hurt, and also like the song Million on the slip. There's also an alternate mix of it which features samples from the Twilight Zone, which I don't think ever got heard, but was part of the recording session. Was removed quite late in the process. We then have track 2, You Know Who You Are, or You Know What You Are, depending on what the label says. You Know What You Are. Best to check. Now, You Know What You Are also draws a parallel with previous Nine Inch Nails songs. There was the track You Know Who You Are, which was released in remix form, or it was the title for a very specific, very minimal remix of Head Like a Hole in 1991. And also it was a vocal line that was in the Opal mix of Head Like a Hole in 1991, is You Know Who You Are. Now, You Know What You Are is again a song which has additional vocals on the booklet. It's got live drums by Dave Grohl. They are phenomenal. If you listen to the 5/1 mix of the album and you isolate out the drums, what a fantastic drum track that is. It's also got a remix by Clint Mansell of Pop Will Eat Itself. And here is a Pop Will Eat Itself t-shirt from 2005, the year that the album came out, of course. But You Know What You Are is, in my opinion, one of the finest Nine Inch Nails songs. They haven't played it live for ages, and I really, really wish that they had done, because it's got this lyric around, you know who you are, and, don't you, whatever, I can't even remember what you are, but there's this wonderfully threatening whispered vocal right at the bottom of the mix that you can get out from the 5.1. It really kind of sticks in the head a little bit, and you kind of go, oh, so that's what it was. Whilst I remember, this is the booklet that comes with the 2017 vinyl edition of the album, and I better go and check and see where the lyrics are, rather than me trying to quote them from memory when they're all written down. I could go for where they're always written down, of course. Yeah. So track 3 is The Collector, and Collector has I think a fascinating little lyrical conceit that sits in it, which is very much around asking the questions around, you know, I pick things up, I'm a collector, all and things, and things, well, things, they tend to accumulate. I have this net, it drags behind me, and it picks up feelings for me to feed upon. So The Collector, as I've mentioned before, the album is with teeth. In the lyrical title of the album, details things like consequences and legacy and ramifications of your actions. You know, you can't outrun the shadow of your decisions. And The Collector kind of asks a question around, okay, so I've picked up these feelings, I've picked up these emotions, I've got a net behind me, it drags all these things behind me, the legacy of my history. And then it then kind of, from a newly sober perspective, it asks the question is, can I still do this? Am I a person, or am I, what am I? Who am I? Where am I? What am I going to be in future? Now that I'm no longer somebody that is ruled and defined by addiction and pleasure, am I going to be permanently sober forever? Am I going to become that sober bore at party that tells everyone about how he's seen the light and got what alcoholics refer to as a moment of clarity? Or am I going to be something else? It's about kind of like going, well, now that a key part or component of my personality no longer applies, what is left? Is there a void? Is there a black hole? Is there a vacuum? What am I going to put in there? And I mean, certainly from my perspective, this is the first album that was released by Nine Inch Nails after I made the decision to leave Birmingham, after I made the decision to move from that town, and I could very clearly identify with the emotions that perhaps he details in The Collector, the ones around sometimes you do need to step beyond, you need to go to somewhere else, you need to try and see if you can step outside of the shadow of the legacy of the decisions that you've made over time. And it's not my favourite Nine Inch Nails song, not by a long shot, but it's an important one in understanding the band's lifespan, really. You flip over to side 2 of your vinyl LP, although of course vinyl LPs were pretty darn hard to get at the time, so this is one of the 2017 repressings. And then you have Love Is Not Enough. Love Is Not Enough is a you know, a fine song. It was the first song that was written for the album, and I think it had a working title of The Clamp. I don't quite know why it was called The Clamp to start with, but so be it. And it was inspired by Twin Peaks, actually, which is pretty exciting. Is the idea of when you think about Nine Inch Nails intersecting with David Lynch, and they've done a fair bit of work for with an intersecting with Lost Highway, with the Twin Peaks: The Return from 2017, which by the way is incredible and I recommend it highly. There is also that element of these lyrics being inspired by a line that was from the original Twin Peaks. When the band play Love Is Not Enough live, there are different drum patterns and different loops to the ones that are on the record, but only a true train spotter will remember that. Luckily, I've written it down on a piece of paper over here, so I don't have to remember that. But it's the second song with love in the title, and the second song where Trent sings the word love. You know, after running away from it for the previous 16 years in his career, he's now mentioned it twice within 20 minutes on an album, so must be you know, a degree of maturity around that. We have track 6 on the LP, which is the third single from the album, but was only released in America, is Every Day Is exactly the same. And by the way, the cover art that we've got for that is thematic. So there's a sunrise and there is a sunset on the back. It's backed with remixes of The Hand That Feeds, the DFA mix and the Photech mix only, which was a single in Europe featuring the LP mix and Richard X mix, and then a Sam Fogg versus Carlos D mix of Every Day Is Exactly the Same. Carlos D being the bass player from Interpol, who some of you may have heard of, that were kind of in and around and became kind of popularish at the time. If you look at the cover to this, by the way, what you can see is there are some tyre tracks. Those tyre tracks are deliberate on the cover. They're there to indicate that there has been a movement and a progression. And even though you're looking at dawn, which then becomes a sunset, what you're looking at also is that the narrator has moved forward, is disappearing into the day. because there's no tomorrow. So effectively they're not staying there, they're actually disappearing into the fact that there is the dawn. So there you go. It is yeah, well thought out, the visual approach for this. Most people go, woof, I don't even understand that, or oh, it's a cool cover and I'll buy it. Looks like Nine Inch Nails. It's a Nine Inch Nails remix EP. This is the closest thing there was to a remix album for the With Teeth period. But again, as I've said before, there's a number of songs on the album where there are additional lyrics on the lyrics sheet. Every Day Is Exactly the Same has additional lyrics on the lyrics sheet. It was also brought back to the tour set list for post-COVID 2022, because during the 2020 to 2021 period when COVID was in full flight, there was an awful lot of monotony going on. There was not a huge amount of activity that was happening. So yeah, there we are. And then I think it's track 7 is called With Teeth. It is side 2, track 3, With Teeth, and it's a song that is lyrically around having the teeth of addiction, when it's got its teeth into you and you can't break free and you can't get out without, imposing enormous damage to you. Addiction, in whatever form it takes, psychologically, is probably very similar to like the inside of a shark's mouth. And a shark's mouth has lots and lots of teeth, super sharp, many layers. They all point backwards, by the way, so that if you try to take yourself out of it, it tears you to pieces. It's actually easier to be eaten by the shark than it is to break free from its mouth. That is the teeth of With Teeth, and it's a pretty powerful image that goes with it. Over to side 3, track 1, the second single from the album, released in Europe and the UK and not anywhere else, is Only. This is another Nine Inch Nails classic. I love it to bits. It's one of my favourite Nine Inch Nails songs, and again it makes reference to some previous ones in the band's body of work. There's it recalls down in it the idea about there's a lyric about, just when I saw it there was a tiny little scab, when I started picking at it, I get this feeling that it was something like I should have had, and there was like, it's kind of like a cloud. I was way up in the sky, and there was just a tiny little dot and it was pulling me down, that type of thing. So there's a lyrical callback to Down in It. It was the last song that was finished for the album. It's a song that has, if I was writing Nine Inch Nails set lists, Hand That Feeds and Only would be in every single one of them. It is one of my favourite Nine Inch Nails songs of all time. Only. There is no me, there is only you. And it's lyrically, it's strong and it's engaging, and it's got this idea around the concept of, identity and character and person, and who is somebody, and where does one person end and the other person begin? How does that all work together? That's a pretty important part of the song and what it's all about. The lyric, by the way, is really strong, but also the video is absolutely fucking brilliant. Directed by David Fincher, who you have seen from such films as Zodiac and Seven, and Panic Room, which is not amazing. And it's actually it's one of those those dot things where you've got like lots and lots of tiny little steel nails. And then what happens is the whole video is basically Trent Reznor's face kind of singing the song through the dots on the steel board, and it's just got a really kind of threatening aura. There's a Twitter account, I think, called Music with Threatening Auras. It most definitely has that in Only. There is a DVD single and there is a CD single, which is backed with the DFA remix of The Hand That Feeds, making its CD debut, and also a version of Love Is Not Enough live from rehearsals, whereas the DVD single features the Only music video and just audio of Only and Love Is Not Enough live from rehearsals for the With Teeth tour. We then have a track called, I think, Getting Smaller, which was, I think, hasn't been played, and a track called Sunspots, which was played live for the first time at Brixton Academy in June 2022, and then finally The Line Begins to Blur. And The Line Begins to Blur is a song that the band played live a lot. It was a staple of the With Teeth tour. It was a banger, to put it technically, and it was around corruption in life. It was around the gap between what is and what should be, and it was also about a thing called resistance theory, which is a psychological concept around where suddenly, where do you draw the line? Where do you draw the moment where you go, right, that is not acceptable anymore. That is my line, this far and no further. And when the line begins to blur, it's difficult for you to be able to go, that's the point, that's exactly where I draw my resistance. So it's a song that works very, very well. It's got an ascending riff that kind of puts everything together. I love it live. Then we have Beside You in Time, and we have a track called Right Here Where It Belongs. Right Here Where It Belongs, by the way, is it's got this lyric about, here I am, an animal in a cage, and am I right where I belong? What if everything was just an elaborate dream? And we've all felt that, you know, at certain points in our lives, sometimes we've looked at certain situations almost with a dispassionate kind of step back, where you can kind of step out of yourself and kind of go, is this really happening? Is this who I am? Is this what's going on right now? Am I really facing this awful existential threat to my existence? What is it? It's a great song. Absolutely love it. Works perfectly as the last track on the album. So on the UK edition, we have 2 extra tracks here. Home, which again was on a B-side of some formats of The Hand That Feeds, and then we have another version of Right Where It Belongs, which is a different vocal mix as well. If you have the there was also, as I've mentioned before, a 5.1 DVD version of the album, so you can play it on your 5.1 stereo system. Got a lovely separation of instruments, really lends itself to remixing the album, by the way. If you want to remix the album, get the 5.1 version and take the separate stems that are out of there. You'll get 6 isolated audio stems, so you'll be able to remix the LP. And with that is the With Teeth album, but that's very far away from everything that goes with the With Teeth experience. So the band went on tour. They had a new lineup. The only continuous member, apart from Trent Reznor, was Jerome Dillon on drums, who had drummed on the Fragile tour, and was then playing drums on the With Teeth tour. I only saw one show on this tour, and the reason I only saw one show on this tour was twofold. The first one is the tour started on the 23rd of March 2005. This is a bootleg CD of the first show from the tour, recorded at a place called the where is it now, the William Saroyan Theatre in Fresno, California, on the 23rd of March 2005, and that was a short, aggressive club tour that the band played to warm up the new lineup, with Aaron North and Geordie White and Alessandro Cortini in, where the band played a lot of songs that hadn't previously been heard or released. So on the first night of the tour, they played 3, 4, 5, 6. You know, they played 7 songs which nobody had heard before. When they played London for the first time, which was the 30th of March 2005 at the Astoria. Amazing venue. I miss the Astoria. I was watching somebody being born that day and becoming a father for the first time, which kind of puts your going to see a band in perspective a little bit, it's fair to say. Now, the tour was fairly eventful, put it bluntly. They had a new lineup. They did the club tour, then they did Europe, then they went back to arenas in America, and the arena leg, which was turned into the sell-through DVD, Beside You in Time, from 2006. The other thing that we did have is that it was a sober tour, and so there was an element of Trent was dealing with stage fright and anxiety. Some of that obviously was self-created and self-inflicted, because all anxiety ultimately is a representation of someone's insecurities, and I'm as familiar with that as anybody else, and I've done some work around addressing my own anxieties in that respect. The fear of playing live had started to go for Trent. He was starting to inhabit the songs as a narrator, and he described his tour as any restrictions that I have are self-imposed and self-created. the element of thinking about from being an addictive personality is you will always be an addict. Is what you choose to be addicted to is the thing that matters. And if you choose to be addicted to artistic creation and interpretation, or if that's the route where you want to direct your energies rather than direct them into drugs or alcohol or sex or pleasure or gambling or whatever else it is, that was where Trent then put his energy into, is to creation and performance and furthering the exploration of Nine Inch Nails. Although obviously whatever he did by very definition would have been Nine Inch Nails. There were no solo albums whilst Nine Inch Nails was an ongoing entity, although obviously that has changed over the years. And the 2005 tour, I saw one show at the London Brixton Academy on the 4th of July 2005. It was very good. I really, really enjoyed it, but I could sense that whilst Nine Inch Nails had changed and I had changed, we hadn't changed in the same directions. We'd gone in slightly different points. So I wasn't, the furious, heartbroken 18-year-old that had seen the Pretty Hate Machine tour and had seen it as some kind of glorious exorcism of unwanted feelings. Now I was a more mature person with a better relationship to myself and the people around me and to my own emotions and feelings. And so I was starting to feel that maybe, where Nine Inch Nails were going wasn't where I was going, and I didn't know if I was going to stay bit. Well, I mean, I was always going to love Nine Inch Nails, but was I going to be as active a fan of Nine Inch Nails as I had once been? And I think this was where Nine Inch Nails and I started to go in very, very different directions. And I still love the band, obviously, because I can't do YouTube videos talking about it for 40 minutes if I don't. But my relationship to Nine Inch Nails has changed, and it's no longer quite as I'm not the angry man that I was when I first heard Pretty Hate Machine in 1989. I now understand that anger is the result of disappointment, and anger is a result of sadness. So, for example, if you're angry at a situation, it's not because you want to be angry, it's because you're disappointed and you want to change the situation and you're frustrated that you can't change the situation, is often where anger comes from. And that anger manifests itself in a number of forms, and you try and direct that anger as an energy into something that's positive and creates a positive contribution to the world that you live in. So whilst I'm angry about a certain number of things, politics particularly, I try to direct that anger towards improving the situations and circumstances that I find myself in. Although sometimes when, let's say, a train company cancels a train and you're sat there basically on a station for an hour with your dick out going, I'm trapped now, I'm a prisoner, I've got nothing I can do. Those situations, it's completely understandable to be angry because you want to change the situation, but you're frustrated and you can't go home yet. So there you are. So that was a detour into the philosophy of anger, which really I should have left for Metallica's Saint Anger episode, which is the next Metallica episode I will do. Instead, let's talk about the With Teeth tour, which I have done. There was a bootleg DVD from the tour here, recorded in New Orleans on October the 29th, 2005. It's a shoddy copy. In fact, the quality is fucking atrocious, but it is what it is. And it features the band with a guest drummer because Jerome Dillon had a heart murmur and couldn't play and was no longer a member of Nine Inch Nails. I think perhaps he was ejected from the group a little quickly and a little cruelly, but the machine has to go on, doesn't it? And then we had the summer 2006 tour, the band playing a combination of arenas and big outdoor venues in America, which became the Beside You in Time DVD and Blu-ray and high def DVD, which I don't have because it's a dead format and I hate HD DVD. The band brought on a guest for a couple of shows, Saul Williams, who Trent was a big fan of, especially at New Orleans. Actually, they did versions of two songs by him, one called The African Student Movement and the other one called List of Demands. Well worth getting a chance to listen to. There were also a couple of songs which were both, or at least one of which appeared on the Beside You in Time extras, which were recorded at around about the same time but didn't quite fit onto the LP. So there is Non-Entity and Not So Pretty Now. Not So Pretty Now was only played live once, I think at the K-Rock FM breakfast session in May 2006. Non-Entity was played live a number of times, and it appears on the Beside You in Time release. Those two songs were later re-recorded and issued in 2009 for the Ninja EP, which I will get to when we talk about the Slip. In the meantime, the band did the Beside You in Time release, the first Blu-ray from Nine Inch Nails, created by Rob Sheridan in conjunction with Trent, that effectively just detailed the band's 2006 summer tour. There was one last thing the band did during this period, which I haven't yet talked about, which was Trent used his newfound sobriety to work with Peter Murphy from Bauhaus, to do a number of Nine Inch Nails and Trent Reznor solo radio sessions. 4 of them. One was in Boston on the 23rd of June 2006, one was in Chicago on the 1st of July, one was in Atlanta on the 7th of June, and one was in Washington on the 13th of June, which was a combination of cover versions and obscurities. So on the 7th of June in Atlanta, they did Head Like a Hole with Peter Murphy on vocals, Sanity Assassin, which is a Bauhaus song, and Hurt. On the 13th of June in Washington, it was a session with TV on the radio, Trent, I think Atticus Ross, and Peter Murphy. They did a cover of TV on the radio's Dreams, Bela Lugosi's Dead by Bauhaus, which Trent Reznor sang on, and a cover of Final Solution by Pere Ubu, who I don't know at all. Then on the 23rd of June in Boston, it was Trent and Peter Murphy, and they did Reptile, a cover version of The Normals' Warm Leatherette, Strange Kind of Love, and Iggy's Nightclubbing. And then the last one on the 1st of July in Chicago was 4 Joy Division songs, being Dead Souls, as covered on the Crow soundtrack, 24 Hours, Warsaw, and Atmosphere. You can download all of those from the Nin Live wiki, and they're very, very good indeed, and very much worth getting. And that is the Nine Inch Nails Beside You in Time and With Teeth periods. It was a strange time for me as a fan to feel myself moving away from the band and what it was doing, still liking them, still seeing all the things in them that I liked, but knowing that I'd changed, and whilst the band had changed, I hadn't changed in the way the band had changed. It was a pretty strange period to be a fan, really, and whilst I enjoyed the gig, there was very definitely a sense of that I'd started to grow beyond what Nine Inch Nails were at that point in time. I do recommend it. It's a really good period for the band. There's lots of gold in the hills there, but it's not really. There was a sense of me listening to it and going, yeah, where I am is not where Nine Inch Nails are. I've gone in a slightly different direction. And there was an element of me thinking, well, actually, if you're going to put all your energy and all your effort into kind of working through problems and issues, and if you spend 15, 20 years working on that and you haven't got any solutions, the question that I was starting to ask was, are you any good at solving these problems, or are these problems going to be a permanent situation? And this isn't to say that I wasn't sympathetic to those issues, or I didn't feel strongly about those issues. It's more, if you've had 15 years to solve a problem and you haven't been able to solve it, there's a question to be asked around, are you ever going to solve that issue? And the answer is, as we will find out from future Nine Inch Nails albums, probably not, because Nine Inch Nails aren't just for Christmas or adolescence, they're for life, and I'm still a fan of them, just in a slightly different way to the way that I was 30 years ago. And that wraps up With Teeth. As I've said before, I'm on tour, so there's not going to be too many of these over the next few days, next week and a half or so. I will be seeing The Cure, and if you're seeing The Cure, I'll probably be seeing you. Although you might, of course, be avoiding me. And in the meantime, stay beautiful and take care of yourselves and everybody else. See you all later. Thank you if you made it this far, all the way to the end. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you have been watching this whilst doing, I don't know, the washing up or the housework or something, and this has made the housework less boring. If it has made the housework more boring, I'm really, really sorry about that, but I can only do what I can do. Okay, so stay beautiful, see you all soon, and adios. All right, bye.